Well, this is fun. We are back again, and there is my compatriot and also my core director, Dr. Daniel Janosik, who will be taking the next course, IS 505. So this is our fifth course in a degree of 10 courses. This is really the halfway point. And this is an interesting course that we're going to be starting on March the 27th, so at the end of this month, because it doesn't just deal with the origins of Islam, it does with the whole history, all
Right.
1400 years of Islam, including up to the present. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Daniel Janosik. But before I do that, just so you all know, this starts on March 27th and it goes till May the 15th. It's always on a Monday night. We always do our recordings, our lectures from 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here in the United States, usually for 2 hours. Sometimes, like last night, it went for 3 hours. It depends on how many questions we get or what kind of discussion. Because what's important is that we get you students to come and actually engage with us. These are live lectures. These are not canned lectures. We're going to be there, both myself and Dr. Janosik. We're going to be doing this live. Each lecture will be a new lecture. It's not like the one that was done 2 years ago. So you're getting new material. It is relevant for what's happening now, and we want to make sure that you respond. We're going to be here to respond to your questions. That's why it's important that you do try to come to the lectures on the Monday nights. Now, there are some of you obviously who will not be able to do that because you're living in Europe or you're living in Africa or you're living in Asia. You'll be fast asleep at 8 o'clock Eastern time here. Therefore, we record every lecture. We do recordings, and then we will send it to you the next day so that you can watch it in your own time. With every lecture, we also have PowerPoints. And the PowerPoints that all the lectures or the lecturer follows will also be sent to you the next day. Daniel is going to be looking at the history of Islam. I'm going to let him do a little about what that means and exactly what are the different subjects. But before we do that, we do need to talk about what it's going to cost. It's going to cost, if you're taking it for a master's degree, that means full time. You're going to have to, as a master's degree student, you're going to have to do papers. You're going to have to do a final test. You're going to have to be involved in the discussions during the week. And you're also going to have to do some responses to the lectures that you're hearing, as well as the reading material, because you're going to have to read books and articles that we sent. But for those people who are doing it full time, it costs about $330. Well, it costs $330 per unit. Every lecture is 3 units, so that's $990 right there. That's for those of you who want it for a master's degree. There are an awful lot of you who don't really need to have a master's degree. You want it to audit it. To audit it means you can participate in all the discussions during the week. You can be a part of Populi and also be engaging with those who are taking it full time. For those students, it costs $280 for the entire course. That's for all of the 8 lectures for the 8 weeks. Now, there are some of you who don't really want to be in part of the discussions. You just want to hear the lectures and you want to get the PowerPoints. That's called personal enrichment. For those students, it only costs $225 for the entire course. And of course, you will just see us then on the Monday nights. But I want to get back and talk about what this course entails, because this is the historical course of the whole 1400 years of Islamic history. So, Daniel, I understand you have a PowerPoint. You're going to introduce that with us and go through each one of the lectures week by week by week by week.
You're right, Jay. And I'm going to also in the first slide just review some of the things that you mentioned so that they have a visual, and of course that helps reinforce. So yes, the lectures will be March 27th through May 15th. Those are the 8 lectures. And then those the master students will have 7 weeks in addition to that to finish any of their papers and the final paper and the final exam. So that gives them the extra time. As Jay said, we're going to continue the Monday nights. It works well, 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time. So that is something to keep in mind. But of course, we will be recording them, and the link is sent out to all students usually the next day, and that link will go right to the video on Vimeo, and you can even download it and use it in your own ministry. Same thing with the PowerPoints. You will get a link to those, and you will be able to download those, and we give you full permission to use that information. We want you to use that information for the benefit of the gospel. And as Jay said, the master's degree extended time is from May 15th. After the 8 weeks, you have until July 10th to finish everything up and turn it in. And as he said, with the cost, $330 per credit hour for the master student, $990 for each one. And really with the whole course, when you think about it, 10 courses on Islam, 2 other courses on theology, really you're dealing with a 36 hour degree for about $12,000, which is really good for a master's degree. Audit students, 280, and personal enrichment students, 225. Okay, well, let's look at the course week by week. This will help you understand what we're going to look at. Jay does such a good job of focusing on the origins, and I'm going to tell the rest of the story. What happened before, what happened a little bit in the 7th and 8th century, and especially what happened afterwards, so that we get a full picture. And this is so important when you look at the history of Islam. So in the first week, we're going to set the scene. We're going to look at the other religions of late antiquity to see how this development that became Islam occurred within this milieu in the Middle East. We're going to look at Arabia before Islam, the so-called Jahiliyyah period. You need to understand what Muslims mean by that. And then we're going to look at oral literature because that's what the Arabs really had. It was just the non-Muslims mainly who were writing things in the 7th century. And we're going to look a little bit about Arabic writing and the development of that Northern Arabic that was that we find in the Quran, and that will be helpful in understanding some really interesting things about Islam and the beginning stages. Week 2, we're going to look at the emergence of Islam from 600 to 750 into the Umayyad period. This is the time of Muhammad, the origins of the Muslim community. We're going to see how the Muslims look at that, and also how the non-Muslims documented that at that time. So we're going to look at some of those writings of the early non-Muslims. And we're going to compare the many faces of Muhammad that came out not only at that time, but in times afterwards. We're going to look at the Rashidun, because these are the 4 main caliphs that supposedly started the whole caliphate. And we're going to try to understand where they fit in and if they fit in. The early formation of Islam will be part of that, so we'll kind of give a condensed version of that material, some of the cutting edge material that we're learning about. And then we're going to look at intermediate monotheism. What I mean by that is what came together. Was it a Jewish Christianity? Was it an apocalyptic time? What started all of this? And there's some interesting information that we will pull together at that time. And that will lead to what we call the neo-revisionist view. So it'll be an exciting look, a little bit different from what you've had in the other courses. And yet it's very much what we need to understand in order to understand what comes later. The third week is dealing with the early controversies between Islam and Christianity. So we'll look at the Quran and the Christianity at that time and how they interacted. We'll look at some of the Muslim polemics and apologetics back and forth, starting with John of Damascus and Leo III and others who dealt with apologetics at that time. Some very interesting dialogues that we need to understand. And then we'll go into the Umayyad period, where we really had the formation of Islam, and I believe too the development of the Quran, the development of the religion, and the development of the whole idea of Muhammad. That was elaborated later on with the hadith and the biographies and so on. So we'll look at the expansion and the formation of Islamic polity, the beginning of the Islamic law, and as it came into the Quran as well. Week 4 is very important because this is the time of the early Abbasid period. And this is really where a lot of the information that we have on Islam, early Islam, even Muhammad, was written in the Abbasid period. We need to realize that 200 years later. We'll look at religion and politics because that's when the political realm developed. That's really where Shiism and Sunnism developed. It wasn't earlier. It came during this time, and we'll look at the reasons for that. Islamic theology, again, developed because of the interaction with Christian theology, and it's exciting to look at this theological pursuit because the Muslims are really trying to understand what was taking place and how they can interact with Christianity and the whole idea of the Trinity and the deity of Christ and so on. And it's a very rich time, and we will be looking at that. Sharia developed at that time, the roots of the Sharia law. And then also the whole idea of the dhimmitude, the subjugation of the Christians and the role that Christians had to play. So that's week 4. Then we'll get into the medieval Islam from 1000 AD to 1500 AD. And there's a lot that happened during this time, during medieval Islam. Sufism came in and took a major role. There were different sects that developed. Shiism rose during that time and had a great influence on Islam itself. The so-called Islam's golden age is something that I very much enjoy going through because there's so much material that you hear about that really didn't happen. The golden age was very tarnished, and we're going to see what really took place, especially in Spain, where the Andalusian adventure took place, supposedly. And there was kind of a resurgence of science and medicine within the Islamic world, but it was very much something that developed from earlier Greek science and science of other cultures, but they brought it together, and there were some very interesting things that were happening in that particular scientific world that we need to look at and appreciate and understand. Kalam philosophy was something that was developed, but we need to understand where it came from and what happened to it and why there was a demise, and that's what I call the closing of the Muslim mind, because there was a famous philosopher, teacher, Al-Ghazali, who said, reason is not what we need to follow anymore. It's just revelation. Philosophy is a dead end. And yet at that same time, Thomas Aquinas was coming around and showing us that reason was very important in order to understand our faith better. So there was that controversy taking place. Week 6 is very important because this is where we will go into the Crusades, the time when Christians kind of woke up in the West and realized that something had to be done because, well, half of the Christendom was already subjugated to Islam within the first 100 years. And this was kind of the response. But we need to understand more what really happened in the Crusades, not these stories that we get from different factions today. And we'll look at the history of jihad very briefly, but we'll get a good overview of what was going on and why it developed and what's going on today, which we'll finish up later on. The Mongols came 1200. They kind of destroyed the Abbasid period. and they ruled for a while until the Ottomans. And so we'll also put in there the history of Christian-Muslim relations, which will really help us understand what was taking place and why the developments later on occurred. And that's what we'll look at: modern Islam from 1500 to the present in week 7, focusing mostly on the Ottoman Empire, which was one of the 3 major ones, the Umayyad, the Abbasid, and then the Ottoman. But we need to understand a little bit about the Safavid Empire and the Mughal Empire as well. And then this big question: whose land is it? The Palestinian dilemma that still is very much at the heart of what's happening with Israel and the Middle East today. And so we'll look at the kind of the root of that and what's going on now. And then week 8, we'll pull it all together. We'll talk about Islam in the 21st century, what's going on now, how we need to respond to that. We'll look at fundamentalism and terrorism to some extent. And then we're going to look at the way forward. We're going to use, through the course, we're going to use my book, The Guide to Answering Islam. And it deals with history, it deals with the beliefs, it deals with all these different things, jihad, crusades. But in every chapter, I will take what the Muslims say, what the critique is, the apologetic problems, and so on. But after all of that, we'll deal with how we can use this information to reach out to Muslims, because that's what we want to do with these courses. We want to understand what's going on with Islam so that we can defend what we believe, but also refute the error that we find in Islam so that we can bring Muslims to Christ. And that's what this course is all about as well, giving us that foundation and the historical overview. So, Jay, that's a lot, but that's what we're going to do in a nutshell.
Daniel, I can't wait. I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to be there every Monday
Yes.
night. I'm going to
And
be.
I am so glad you are.
You're doing all the lectures, but I'm going to be in the background, getting the questions, helping out the discussions, making sure that people are being brought in, and also that people are available so that they can throw these questions. 8 weeks, folks. Did you see that? Did you get all the material? This is the whole history of Islam, starting with the 7th, 8th, going right up through the Umayyad period, then to the Abbasid period, and ending with the Ottoman period, then of course to present, because in the last 100 years, enormous has happened since the Ottomans
yes.
were shut down.
And we
Now,
need to understand all that.
yes, yes, absolutely. Now, as you notice, this is for Christians. Did you hear Daniel say that? This is a seminary. We are part of Veritas International University, so we are a seminary. This is only for Christians. I know some of you will get upset and say, hold on a minute, this is not fair. We have to do that. So it's only for Christians. If you do believe that Jesus is God, that he died on the cross and rose again for your sins, take this course and take any of the 10 courses that we have in this degree program. But you have to register. Now, how do you register? You need to, and I'll put it right here at the bottom. You can just look right down there, look at the bottom there, and you will see this email. You need to email info@ves.edu. That's it. info@ves.edu. And when you do send a email, say you would like to register for this course. Now, this is IS 505, the history of Islam. Make sure you put IS 505 so they know at the office which one you're taking. We'd love to have you there on March 27th at 8 o'clock in the evening. We would love to invite you. We want as many of you as possible. Make sure, could you hold up that book one more time, Daniel? This is the book that really is the backbone to the whole course, the Guide to Answering Islam. We're going to be using an awful lot of material in that. So even if you're not taking the course, buy the book. Because you do need to be able to follow through. Daniel has done such a great job of pulling together so many different areas of Islam into one book so that most all the questions you have are answered in that book. And that's why it's so good to have Daniel on board. This is why he's teaching it and I'm not. And it's important that we get as many students to come along with us. So we're talking in just a few weeks. Make sure you go down to that email at the bottom. Do register. You will have to register before the 27th. For those who are late, it doesn't matter. Since it's all being recorded, we will send you the recordings. But we'd like to see you live, as many as possible, because we want to be able to engage. This makes it much more exciting for you and for us and for the other students who will be coming on board. Daniel, any last word before we move on?
Yes, I'm looking forward to the course very much. I feel it's one of the bedrocks of what we do. And Jay, it follows up with your 7th century so well, because your focus is just awesome. But for the students who are doing the masters, get the registration in soon, because you're going to have other paperwork that you need to turn in if you are not a present student. If you are a present student in the master program, of course, then that's fine. But I'm looking forward to it, and I hope to see you there.
Great. All right. Starting on March the 27th, we hope to see as many as possible for 8 weeks, every night, every Monday night. Until that time, this is Jay and Daniel, over and out.
See you.